Good evening, everyone. My name is Rebecca, and welcome to tonight's program. So, to start, I want to say our country finds itself once more in the dawn of another election season and in the middle of a pandemic, so the stakes could not be any higher. In the context of the upcoming 2022 elections, many Filipinos, most of them first-time voters, find themselves in an environment overcrowded with fake news and misinformation regarding both current and historical events. Perhaps one can argue that this year's environment is even more perplexing than the ones before. It is of utmost importance, we believe, that we do our part in addressing these issues that will certainly affect voter education. So tonight, in partnership with We the Future Philippines, we give you Haraya, our hopes and aspirations for the future, an election literacy panel discussion. Join us tonight. Maging maalam tayo para sa makabulhang pakikialam. For tonight's panel, we will be joined by esteemed individuals from their respective fields. We will also be joined by youth sector representatives from different organizations who advocate for values and critical thinking. And later tonight, we will be launching the 6th special digital issue of Novice entitled Haraya, Hilagpos sa Haba ng Tanikala, an anthology that reflects the hopes and aspirations for our country. At the end of this webcast, the issue will be available on our website, noviceph.com, all for free. And speaking of the digital anthology, we have here tonight the contributing creatives of the issue, together with my co-editors at Novice and team members of We the Future Philippines. Can we show everyone who is joining us tonight? Hi, everybody. Say hi, everyone. If you can turn on your cameras, say hello to everybody watching us tonight. Thank you for sharing your amazing pieces with Novice. And we'll be able to see the full issue later on. See you guys again later. All right, we encourage everyone to share this stream. Let's help each other out. Share this to your friends and family and get your questions ready for the Q&A after the discussions. Also, don't forget to like and follow us, Novice PH Magazine, and We the Future PH on our social media platforms, which we are actually showing at the bottom of our screen. And Novice and We the Future PH would like to thank our partner organizations. We'd like to show these. Thank you so much for trusting us in this project. And so I'll move on to the parts of the program tonight. So we've got 4 simple parts. We've got the primer, where we'll be discussing some topics that we think are very important for us to understand. And we've got the main panel. We've got the question and answer portion at the end of the main panel and the launch of Haraya. Once again, welcome to everyone who are now just tuning in to our live election literacy panel discussion. This is Haraya, once again, our hopes and aspirations for the future. Novice and We the Future PH believe that voting is both a right and a responsibility. To vote is almost like forming a hypothesis, if you may, an educated guess or a bet on a future leader for our country's future outcomes. Tonight's topics and discussion is our attempt to educate you so you can hopefully make educated, responsible bets. So without further ado, let me start with the primer. Please welcome the Program Director for Fact Check Philippines, John Albert Pagusan. Hi, Albert.
Having me here. Hello, good evening, Rebecca.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming. We move on to our Director of Xavier University Center for Legal Assistance. Please welcome Attorney Ernesto Neri. Hi, Attorney Tonton.
Good evening, Albert. Maayong gabi from CDO.
Maayong gabi po. Ayan, we welcome you tonight and thank you so much for joining us. So I'll go straight to our questions. Our first question will go to you, Attorney Tonton. So in your opinion, how well-informed are the youth today? And what do you think is the extent of social media misinformation and disinformation, not just among your immediate professional and personal circle, but your local community in general?
Right. Now, it's quite hard to gauge how well-informed the youth are. But I could say that the youth, the generation now, can be the most informed generation in history because in their fingertips, they have access to the internet, right? Pero that's the double-edged sword because we know for a fact that the internet now has been, in a way, weaponized to mislead and misinform a lot of young people. So, meron ang capacity to be informed, but the continent where they will explore that information is quite treacherous, Rebecca. So I think that the question really is, how do we keep on informing, not informing, but educating our young people about how to verify the sources of information? We also have to also realize, in my observation din that the internet has become the sort of verifier for a lot of people. Di ba? Parang if we get information from our teacher or from our parents or from our friends, parang instinct natin that we go to the internet to check if it's true. So the assumption there is the internet is a reliable source of information. But again, we realized in the past years, especially with the advent of social media, that it has again been weaponized. So we have
Mm,
to check, I think, in terms of our civic education, our digital citizenship curriculum in our schools. Dami, it's too parang overwhelming. But at
yeah,
least we know that it should start with the young people getting educated how to verify, how to fact check. And it should be a culture. It's not something that the ano lang, like a few would know, no? Parang the very educated would know. It should be taught to everyone.
absolutely. I agree, Attorney Tonton. And like you said, it kind of is a double-edged sword. The access, just the easy access to all this information, not necessarily accurate, not necessarily true, but and I agree with you that it's important to learn how to fact check. And that's why we have Albert here, who is our part of Fact Check Philippines. So my next question goes to you again, attorney. In your service to the community, what are the most regrettable impacts of misinformation and disinformation that you have encountered?
Personal, no? It's personal. Really, in the past year, it's really the misinformation rising on COVID matters. Vaccination, for example, right? No,
Mm,
your family members uh, parang believe memes rather than actual opinions from scientists, right?
yes.
And that's for the COVID situation. But even before that,
I think we're having some technical difficulties
as a
with.
lawyer, parang even rights. Hello, all right. So even in terms of rights education, a lot of people are not informed about their rights, or they are misinformed about their rights so that they could not enforce it. As you
Mm,
know, parang 2 years ago, Mindanao was under martial law. And there's a lot
yes.
of information coming out like, if martial law, you cannot assert this particular right, etc. So, ganon, those have real impact, a disempowering
Mm.
impact in the lives of people.
Thank you, Attorney Tonton. And I think I want to emphasize what you said there, that one of the regrettable impacts is it's disempowering people. Because obviously it's either they don't know what their rights are or they're misinformed about what their rights are. So this leads me to question number 3 for you, Albert. Um, so like Attorney Tonton said, it's important that we educate everyone on how to fact check. And so, what we're doing in our primer is we're kind of laying down the foundation for our main panel discussion, kind of unboxing the challenges in which Attorney Donton has done a great job of. So, my question for you, Albert, is what are the challenges in finding the right sources of factual and truthful information, and how do you disseminate them?
All right. The problem that Fact Check Philippines, fact check organizations, and civil society faces when it comes to fact checking is that the truth has become colored. Naging makulay na yung color. It has become a partisan issue. But I think
Mm,
that the fight against fake news, against misinformation and disinformation, should not be a colored issue, should not be a partisan issue. It should be a people's issue. Because Attorney Tonton mentioned earlier that there are issues with vaccines, with human rights, with day-to-day life, so it has become more challenging. In our part as Fact Check Philippines, what we do is that we try to triangulate data first because while information is readily available online, most of the information that verify truths also go beyond our digital borders. Like, for example, when it comes to martial law and democracy, we need to consult some experts and even victims of abuses just to confirm whether these cases are true. Sometimes we have to consult also big organizations. That's why we contact professors, experts, especially in matters like law, maritime issues, vaccines, just to confirm issues because we are a grassroots led organization and fact checking is largely a mass movement of ordinary people. I think we also admit that there might be some information not available to us. So I think that beyond the digital borders that we are in right now, we should engage with institutions. Ayun po.
That's a really good way to put it. So challenging in a way that there's not just one source of information that we can get it from, but like Attorney Tonton mentioned a while ago, it's the internet has become the source of information just because of how easy it is to access it. But like what you said, Albert, you have to engage with institutions, you have to do your research, engage with people, firsthand information if possible. So that leads me to my fourth and last question for this primer. So what types of misinformation do you encounter the most? Are they statistical in nature, historical? Are they about personalities? And which ones are the most challenging to fact check? So, as you know, in this generation of information overload online, how do you also choose which information to fact check? To put it simply, like how do you pick your battles once you've realized, oh, these are the most, you know, types of misinformation that we encounter?
Okay. For our case in Fact Check Philippines, there are three major issues that we face when it comes to disinformation. The first is, this is very funny. We also have everyday issues. We fact check yung bihon. There was circulating news that bihon was made from human particles, was made dirty. So it was like trying to mudsling companies here in the Philippines, and we had to confirm that. And the picture was actually from a factory, a clothing factory from China and not the Philippines. So that's a very funny issue, and that also highlights that fact check and like fake news is an everyday and human issue. The second is, I think, Attorney Tonton and We the Future and many organizations in the Philippines have already raised the issue about democracy, human rights, and martial law. So that was one of the most challenging issues that we face because admittedly I come from a generation that wasn't born in that era. That's why we should have the humility to also consult people who are part of that era, and we also need to talk to people who really suffer those abuses to confirm that. That's why from Fact Check Philippines, you really have to consult organizations that are part of the efforts to not erase and to deliberately revise history. I think the third is, and this is one of the biggest impacts, is that the mistrust in institutions, democratic institutions, and democratic leaders have been have been like deliberately broken. So last year, people have always been accusing us of being biased. But last year, we've already done a lot of fact checks with our leaders, including Senator Bongo. So there was a tweet circulating saying that he said this, but it's not true. So it really tarnishes our trust in leaders like Senator Bongo and also in leaders like Vice President Lenny Robredo, which we feel like we've done already numerous and I think 100 fact check reports on statements and fake news that have circulated about what she said and what she has done, including reports about her personal life. So we have to ask their offices like Senator Bongo and the OVP whether these claims are true or not, and not only use data that's available online. So we think that right now in the 2022 elections, it needs to become a people's issue. It needs to become all of our fights, the fight against fake news, because we need to regain our trust in our institutions and in the truth. Ayun.
Thank you so much for that, Albert. We have a minute. Attorney Tonton, was there anything you wanted to add before I wrap it up?
Albert said it all. No, looking at my own Facebook feed, it's really those things: political posts, revisions of history. But just a trivia, no, before we end, the spreading of false news is actually prohibited by law. It is in the revised penal code, but it's a very old law, 1933. but I'm sure it's not being used. Now, there is an Article 154 which
Mm.
actually says that any person by means of printing, lithography, or any other means of publication publish news, any false news which endanger the public order or cause damage to the interest or credit of the state. So I don't know. I've never heard a case about it, no. But it's there. But it's a American colonial inheritance. But it's something interesting if you would ever use that law.
Thank you so much for that, Attorney Tonton. And with that, unfortunately, we don't have enough time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Attorney Tonton. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time to Albert. I really would just want to emphasize to what one of the things you said, where humility is important, where we should be aware that some of us weren't born in the times of the information that we're trying to verify. And so it's really good to put it out there, to have that humility and not to be bipartisan and make it a fight against fake news and not a fight against each other. Thank you so much once again, gentlemen. We
Thank
hope
you.
to be speaking with you again. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, there you have it, guys. That's our primer for tonight. Thank you so much again to Albert and Attorney Tonton for your time and for your knowledge. I really like what Attorney Tonton said about the law. I didn't even know that that existed. So now we move on to our main panel discussion. As we've discussed the problems and the regrettable impacts and the challenges that we all face, actually, we will be unpacking other issues in our main panel discussion. So to start, let me call on the chairperson for Young Filipino Advocates of Critical Thinking, John Philip Bravo. JP, welcome to tonight's panel discussion.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hi. We also want to welcome the Negros Coordinator for First Time Voters Netowrk, Ken Paolo Gilo. Hi, Ken.
Hello, Rebecca. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. And we also want to welcome the Associate Professor of the Department of Journalism, College of Mass Communication, University of the Philippines, Diliman, Professor Danilo Arao. Are you here, sir?
Yeah. Hello. Good evening to all of you.
Good evening, po, sir. Thank you for coming tonight. And last but not the least, we would like to welcome an election lawyer partner of TAM Law Offices. Please welcome Attorney Ernelson Trojillo. Hello po, Attorney Nelson.
Hi, good evening po. Good evening sa lahat.
Good evening. Good evening to everyone. And for those of you guys who are just tuning in, we are moving on to our main panel discussion where I will be directing questions to our panelists depending on their fields of expertise. So I'll go straight to it. The first question I'll direct to you, Professor Arao. Sir, sorry, I didn't get to ask you, how would you like me to address you, sir?
Well, Danny.
Prof. Danny, okay lang po.
Sure.
Sige po. All right, so our first question is, we've seen how many people online, in order to justify their election bets or those officials they support, go to the extent of denying facts and use misleading information. What do you think drives them to do this?
There are two main reasons. First would be subjective tendency to be emotional in your discourse. We have to remember that gone are the days where we attribute emotional behavior to just simply one particular gender. So even men and women may be prone to such, emotional outbursts. So that's the subjective level. The second point that I'd like to raise here has to do with the fact that there are trolls and there are certain networks of disinformation that are who are actually paid to spread all those lies and all those so-called fake news. So those two main reasons could explain the situation that we're in right now, because one particular angle with regard to fake news is that it's an industry. It's a given fact. I mean, trending news portal, for example, has been earning millions of pesos, and that's the reason why why Facebook cracked the whip on this particular quote unquote media organization. So those factors would have to be remembered when we think about this information, and perhaps later on we can talk about the need to fight such tendencies, because the question remains: okay, those are the two main reasons. How do you quell certain emotional outbursts or control certain emotions? And number two, how do you stop an industry that's still growing
Mm.
for the past 5 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Danny. And thank you for adding to that as well. Aside from answering the question, you presented to us as well the problem that it gives birth to, which is how do we fight it? And that's exactly why we're here, where we will be discussing how we can fight misinformation and disinformation in this time. So I'll for now move on to the next question, which I'll direct to Attorney Trujillo. So while oh no, Attorney Nelson, I'm so sorry. That was so formal. um, while social media companies claim to do their best to stop the spread of fake news and other misleading information online, do we currently have any law or regulation that prohibits or curbs the intentional spread of misinformation? And if there are existing ones, how effective are they, Attorney? I think you're on mute, po.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
That's okay.
let me clarify that. If you're talking about anti-fake news law, we don't
Mm,
have it yet.
mm,
There are already bills in Congress and Senate defying fake news. But there is one provision in the revised penal code, Article 154, which penalizes any person who shall publish or cause to publish as news any false news which may endanger the public order or cause damage to the interest or credit of the state. This is actually the law punishing spreading of false news or fake news, but it is very specific. The fake news must endanger the public order and it must cause damage to the interest or credit of the state.
mm,
It does not cover other form of fake news, like fake news to discredit a particular person
mm.
or a particular entity. All right?
Right.
So as of now, wala pa tayo. I know what you're thinking. The fake news that is rampant today, wala pa tayo niyan. Unless pwede mong
Mm,
stretch yung law para sabihin na, oh, that endangers that fake news that you are trying to spread is endangering
mm.
the public order or is
Yeah.
causing damage to the interest or credit of the state. I-stretch mo.
Mm. Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
in Attorney, when you said that you have to stretch it, I think it becomes hard in that paano mo siya i-gauge? How do you quantify that damage that the law says?
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is actually the weapon of the state. Particularly, let's be frank, the power of the executive, because who will determine if it endangers the public order, and who will determine if the damage or the interest of the state is being if na the damage ang interest or credit of the state, di ba?
That's
So
true. Yeah.
meaning, if there's a false news against or false news or fake news against the other party, the opposition, how can they sue under Article 154? It speaks of the state and public order.
That is so true, and that really does present a big problem because, in that sense, how it's like our hands are tied. There's no law to actually protect people from fake news and tarnishing information. But there's
Yes,
always
yes.
hope.
May I
Yes,
add? But let me
yes, po.
clarify, okay? Fake news, but if the fake news falls under libel or oral defamation, ibang bagay na yan. It's a different
Yes.
matter na. Okay, but
Uh-huh.
you do not call it fake news. It is a
Yeah.
defamatory statement, which may be a fake news.
Mm, that's true.
Okay?
And we'll dive deeper into that po, Attorney, when we move to our next subtopic, which is dichotomy of free speech versus libel.
There's
Thank you for
also
that po.
Rebecca, I have also
Sure,
parang
JP,
input.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for
Tama
it.
si attorney Ernelson. I can also just add something na meron ding provision sa bayanihan to heal as one law na punishes 8 acts including the spreading of fake and alarming information on social media and other platforms. So this is more on like sa COVID-19 as a vaccination.
Mm,
So and those found violating this provision, they face 2 months imprisonment or a fine of not less than 10,000. Courts may also impose a fine up to 1 million. So, but I don't think that it's effective and I don't really support it. It's overbroad, and it can be easily misused by the government to crack down on online criticism and of government efforts. The law can be used to criminalize any online information that the government dislikes. So yeah,
See.
tama si Attorney Emerson
Yeah,
earlier. Yeah.
and actually that provision in bayanihan law, um, in my humble opinion, it is unconstitutional because you haven't defined fake news yet, and here
Mm.
it is sa law, meron ng fake news, may pine-penalize ng fake news, so it's unconstitutional for being vague.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, JP. All right, guys. So in seeing this, that there is a lot of information on how there's not a lot we can do, it seems. But we'll move on to our next question, and I'll direct this to Ken. So given all this information of how it's so easy to post online things that are false, and no, fact checking can be tricky as well. It's a double-edged sword. When you have access to the internet, you don't know which one's correct or which one's not correct. What do you think? What else can we do as everyday Juans or Juana to educate and inform ourselves, to start with ourselves, with accurate information?
Thank you, Rebecca. I think I would like to bank on Prof. Danny's answer earlier that about emotions, because usually meron tayong mga clickbait or meron tayong urge to share a certain information or to amplify a certain information if it confirms our own biases. I saw this one concept called confirmation bias, where we are going to actually believe a certain news or a certain fact because it affirms our beliefs. It affirms what we are standing, or it affirms or it supports yung mga tao na gusto nating i-support, yung mga stances na pareha sa stance natin. So I think that's the first thing that we want to check on ourselves, that we ensure na the moment that we think that something is worth sharing because it's too good to be true, or maybe it's too bad to be true, then that's the moment that you try to fact check it first by checking multiple sources before sharing the news or sharing such fact, no. And then I think a second one would be, again, no, I would like to bank on Prof. Danny's point on emotion, because at the end of the day, I think we are going to ask, where do we come from? Why do we continue on sharing this news, or why do other people continue to share this news? And I think it's to understand where other peoples are coming from, and if we try to combat there are a lot of instances where the fact has been laid down, it has been proven that that is fake, but there are certain repercussions where I tend to believe something, or I tend to support someone because of that fake news. But once that news has been corrected, I would throw in more reasons to support that standard, to support that person, even if that fact has been denied. No, so I think we go back to asking questions
Yes.
instead of putting forward alternatives, because that's the initial reaction. If there's a fake news, we provide an alternative. We don't ask questions. We just
That's
asking
true.
questions actually recognizes where other people are coming from.
Absolutely. You put it really well, Ken, about emotions and asking questions. And I feel it's both a gift and a curse to Filipinos. I may be overgeneralizing this, just my opinion. It's both a gift and a curse for Filipinos, how passionate we are about things. And, when emotions get in the way, our executive decision making, we're not able to, use that and think critically to ask questions that are relevant, that seek the truth. So thank you very much for sharing that.
May I add quickly? Sorry, very, very quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I forgot to mention regarding questions and alternatives. Another one of the prevailing, I think, mistakes that we're doing is that when we see fake news that are supporting what we don't like, we tend to provide our alternative of what we like. We don't attack the fake news. We provide what we want. So I think we have to focus on the fake news and not on what we want.
Yeah. So in a sense, we have to be very objective, right? It's not about how we feel or what we like or what we don't like. It's about our pursuit for truth. Thank you. Well put, Ken. So my fourth question for our subtopic A, which is fighting misinformation and disinformation, I'll open this to either Attorney Nelson or Prof. Danny. So, given the last 5 years, what do you think are the most damaging effects of misinformation and disinformation among people, both personally and in public? So, it's up to you if you want to answer personal experience or public experience. But anyone can take the floor.
Yeah. Attorney Trojillo, is it okay if I go first or?
You go po.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Age before beauty. But anyway, so what we want to stress here is that I'm sure Attorney Trujillo would also want to weigh in later. Is that for the past 5 years, the environment has become toxic, particularly on social media. So that's one of the cost of the spread of disinformation out there. The fact that it has become an industry motivates a lot of political interest groups to really sow disinformation. And right now, we're seeing a surge in denialism, science denialism, climate change denialism. We're even seeing the rise of flat earthers. Fortunately for the Philippines, I have yet to hear of a Flat Earth Philippines chapter, although maybe you can correct me later if there is such a thing now. But I know of certain people, certain Filipinos who are flat earthers. One of them, unfortunately, is a journalist. Don't ask me who it is, but there is that kind of denialism, unfortunately. And for the past 5 years, I think I said a while ago that fake news has become an industry. It is very, very, very unfortunate because 10 years ago, I will tell you that misinformation has no room in public discourse whatsoever. But if I were to say it now, I would be proven wrong. For the simple reason that it's become an industry. But if it's any consolation, uh, it's not something that's exclusive to the Philippines. It has become an industry in Russia, in China, and even in the United States. So we're not really alone. But then again, but just because we're not alone, it doesn't really mean that we shouldn't do something about it. So that's the cost of
Absolutely.
the disinformation. Yeah, Attorney Trujillo for sure would have a lot to add as well.
Well, Prof. Arao, Prof. Danny already mentioned everything, but let me just add, it is on a theoretical level. I think misinformation and disinformation really destroys democracy. Why? Because facts, if there are no facts, there can be no truth. And without truth, there can be no democracy. There can be no real democracy if our society is based on misinformation or disinformation. Right? Example, very relevant ngayon, historical revisionism, right? And I am this is very, very personal to me. As I said to all my students also and sa mga Facebook feeds, if you tell me that you are going to vote for, can I mention a candidate? If you're telling me you're going to vote BBM, for example, without anything that follows that, it's okay because that's your vote. I mean, I cannot contest that. But if you're telling me that you are going to vote for BBM because his father is the best president ever, his father didn't steal, then dun ako umaalma because it is misinformation and disinformation. Your vote is based on a wrong or false information. If your vote is based on you just feel like voting for him, then we have to respect that. But if our vote is based on a false information, I think it is our social responsibility to correct that and then allow him to gauge or to weigh whether, okay, tama ka naman pala, sige, itong magiging boto ko. Or if he still insists, then it's okay, as long as you're done with your social responsibility.
Absolutely. I think I'll that leads to our next question to attorney, and this is open to anyone who wants to share. So like you said, it's our social responsibility to address that misinformation, and I think one of the ways we can do that is if people are actually aware that we need to think critically, that there is such a thing as thinking critically, not just taking things at face value. So the question goes, how can we spark critical thinking among people to bring them to a point where they actually fact check and question answers instead of just taking them at face value?
I don't know, but for me, it all boiled down to education, proper education. I mean, if you were taught in elementary, high school how to think critically or how to to check information, how to filter information. Di ba sa ano pa nga lang yan, I think sa research pa lang, sa thesis, dapat naaano mo na yan napag-aralan mo na yan. But now, ang dali na lang maniwala, ang dali na lang kung anong available, yan na. Hindi na i-check kung sino ang author, anong website. Basta, lalo na pag it is sensationalized, lalo na kapag it tingles the mind of a person, then paniniwalaan niya na yan. So I think for me, education, basic education is really the key para maturuan ng mga tao or mga estudyante to think critically.
Absolutely. Anyone from our youth representatives who wants to weigh in? JP, you go.
JP.
Okay. Tama. I definitely agree with Attorney Trujillo na basic education is the key. Malaki talaga din yung responsibility ng educational institution natin on, fighting disinformation, misinformation. And we can, lagi kasi nating tatandaan na great power comes great responsibility. And lagi na natin ito naririnig sa social media, sa mga celebrities. But I think, I wanna still mention it na we have to think first before sharing any information on our social media feed, fact check before sharing, and the public can also help just by speaking up and expressing their support in fighting disinformation and information. And I think when we identify may fake news na merong disinformation, we should also take the opportunity to educate others. It is not enough na hindi natin i-spread lang I think we have to take the extra steps to help others identify it and empower everyone to speak up when they see it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JP. Sorry, guys. Quickly, Ken, did you want to add something?
Yeah. This is something different from, I also agree to Attorney and to Kuya JP on formal education. But beyond that, I think there are a lot of education on fake news already. There are a lot of education on misinformation. But I think if people really don't care and are complacent about the repercussions of fake news, they won't really matter. They won't really care. So I think as after that education, which is very important in schools, in modules, in curriculums, we could also highlight what is its direct effect and repercussions to the person. How does it affect you personally if you share fake news? How does it affect your credibility as a teacher? How does it affect your credibility as a leader? How does it affect your credibility as a father, as a mother, or whatsoever? I think they also have to connect what's the repercussions, not only to other people, but also to themselves. Because at the end of the day, they will also understand na, okay, hindi ito joke, hindi ito something na complacent lang tayo at walang mangyayari dahil we could just say sorry and delete our post.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That's a wrap for our first topic. We now move on to dichotomy of free speech versus libel, which was mentioned earlier. So, Attorney, what is the concept of free speech under the 1987 Constitution? How is libel defined in our penal laws? And how does criminalizing libel affect the exercise of free speech in an independent press? Sorry, the question's a bit loaded. And you're on mute po.
All right. Free speech under the 1987 Constitution is enshrined in Article 3, Section 4. It provides that no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, and of the press. Because freedom of expression is a fundamental human right. It reinforces all other human rights, allowing society to develop and progress. That's the concept why we are making the freedom of expression a fundamental human right. Because the ability to express our opinion and speak freely is essential to bring about change in society. Now, libel, as defined under Article 353 of the Revised Penal Code, is a public and malicious imputation of a crime, vice, or defect, real or imaginary, or an act, omission, or condition, status, or circumstances tending to cause dishonor or discredit to a natural or juridical person or to blacken the memory of the one who is already dead. It's I know, nakakapagod ang ganyang definition, but basically it's a malicious imputation. Okay, whether it is a crime, a vice, a defect, an act or omission, and it tends to cause dishonor, discredit to a person. Now, for me personally, criminalizing libel is actually an abridgment of the freedom of speech, it actually curtails the freedom of speech. It regulates such freedom. Sabi nga ni JP kanina, di ba, tend to abuse if there is a power. So, yeah, yun yung concept ng libel.
I see. And I think the reason why we're trying to define this is because it seems that when people say things that are not true, or provide or say something about a person or a personality to tarnish them or put them down, they go back to like, oh, but it's freedom of speech. So that leads me to the next question. Prof. Danny, we are entitled and afforded the right to form and have our own opinions, and more importantly, voice out those opinions. In the context of social media platforms, how do we differentiate whether a person's comment is a voiced out opinion or is outright libelous or defamatory? Where do we draw the line?
In journalism, it's true that everyone is entitled to an opinion, but there are opinions that weigh more than others. So how do we draw the line between opinions that are, nonsense or nonsensical, and opinions that should be taken seriously? So it's all about factual and contextual accuracy, which, in the words of Edmund Lambeth, in his book Committed Journalism, An Ethic for the Profession, truth telling is essentially composed of factual and contextual accuracy. So even opinions should be evidence based. In journalism, we don't refer to the generic definition of opinion, which may or may not be based on facts. Because there, you are differentiating between subjective opinion and objective opinion. In journalism, it's all about objectivity. We need to be consistent regarding the notion of objectivity, wherein we try to look at both factual and contextual accuracy. So basically, that's where we draw the line. And as regards your question regarding outright libelous or defamatory opinion, of course, it depends on the language that's used. That's why it's very seldom for journalists to use coarse language or to engage in name calling and other, logical fallacies in explaining their points. And this includes also the editorial writers and the columnists, who are essentially tasked to provide in-depth analysis of issues. So what's basic in journalism, lest we forget, is that it's not just about data presentation. Data are important, but making sense of the reality is also equally important. And to make sense of the reality, that's where analysis comes in. So if you want to have a simplified journalistic equation regarding information, information is equal to data plus analysis. So that's how we try to be more objective and be more substantive and exhaustive in expressing our opinions.
Thank you,
If I
Prof.
may
Danny.
add, Becca, if I
Sure
may
thing.
add, in addition to that, I think one relevant question is who draws the line. Sino ang nagdo-draw ng line if a statement is a mere opinion or outright libelous or defamatory? The answer is the law. It is not the receiver, it is not the giver of the statement who will draw the line. It is the law. Because the law is very specific. The elements are specific. There must be a defamatory statement. There must be malice. There must be publication. The victim is identified. So if you comply with the elements, then that's it. That's already libel. No more drawing of lines.
That's very well put, attorney. That's true. And like what Prof. Danny said, then it's really important then to analyze, right? Like if people don't analyze, then people won't realize that, okay, well, how do we draw the line, and more importantly, where do we base the line drawing? Like sino ang magsasabi, and that's right. It's the law that tells us. And it's objective, right? It doesn't weigh in all like, oh, mayaman tong nagsabi, so it's not libel, things like that. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, Rebecca,
Well,
can I just add a little, just
sure, Prof.
to as a rejoinder to what Attorney Trujillo said, libel has been weaponized, not just under this administration, but even ever since the enactment of the revised penal code in the 1930s. So I'm sure we're aware of the Aves de la Rapiña case, wherein the late T.M. Calao and other journalists were sued for an editorial about titled "Birds of Prey." Basically, it doesn't identify Dean Worcester, but Dean Worcester sued for libel because he felt alluded to in that particular editorial. And libel has been very much like the Birds of Prey case, or Dean Worcester's actions against T.M. Kalau et al. Because it has been used to harass and intimidate journalists. Another thing that we need to add here, although we're veering away on the issue of fake news, is that the movement right now for the media is to decriminalize libel, so that we can defang it in a way that it would still be weaponized, but at least the prospects of imprisonment will not happen for journalists who end up being convicted. I'm sure this is not the occasion to talk about the criminalization of libel, but I just need to put it out there so that the people would know that just like other laws, libel has been most often weaponized. In theory, Attorney Trojillo makes a good point a while ago that it's supposed to serve as a form of check and balance, that there would be some responsibility in the exercise of freedom of expression and freedom of the press. But right now, instead of check and balance, it has been weaponized, and it has been used to harass and intimidate. Some of the moneyed individuals would sometimes have so many properties. For example, you have a journalist based in Manila. They would file a libel case in, let's say, in Mindanao, so that the journalist will be forced, to take an airplane just to appear in court hearings and then go back to Manila. So if for simple filing of cases like that, they carefully choose venues to irritate the hell out of the journalist and the news media organization, so that they would feel, the kind of harassment that they would want to inflict. Thank you.
That's all right, Prof. Danny. Thank you for sharing that. So I think this part of our panel discussion, it kind of is summed up by this quote from an article from We the Public. It kind of says everyone is entitled to their opinion, maybe not to their own truths. And if opinion falters in the face of facts and yet you still persist, your opinion then becomes a delusion. So later on, we can go back to that and see what you think about that. But in discussion of all these things where we've unboxed what the regrettable impacts of misinformation and disinformation are, where the law stands in this, and how even the law is being where like Attorney Nelson said, it was meant to be check and balance. It was meant to be an abridgment of that, but then it's becoming a weapon. It has become a weapon. We know how important it is how we choose leaders, because the leaders, as I said a while ago, they're like a hypothesis. It's like an educated bet on our future, right? So now our next topic is our expectations from leaders. So a few of these questions will be open for the floor. We've got 13 minutes left to be exact. So the first question will be for attorney again. The 1987 Constitution prescribes qualifications for individuals vying for public office during elections, both for national and local positions. In line with the upcoming elections, please give us a brief rundown of these basic qualifications to help new voters alike make their choices.
Okay, I think I think the focus would be the national election. No, these are constitutional positions, so the qualifications can be found in the Constitution. So for the president and vice president, basic, we have 5 requirements. The natural-born citizen of the Philippines, they must be registered voters, able to read and write, at least 40 years of age on the day of election, and resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding the election. That's it. For the senator, natural-born citizen of the Philippines, at least 35 years of age, able to read and write, registered voter, resident of the Philippines, for not less than 2 years immediately preceding the day of the election.
Thank you
lang
for
ang qualification.
That. Yeah, the qualifications, which leads us to the second question. And it says the qualification can read and write, right? There has not been a lot of clamor to amend this or change it to at least a university graduate or a certain educational attainment. Do you think it is high time this should be granted? How will it affect our democratic tradition? Prof. Danny, what do you think?
I think that would be very, very elitist, to say the least, because if we look at, statistics of population of the country, school age population as against those who are going to school, if I'm not mistaken, it's a little more than 10% of the population, school age population, being able to get into college. And
Mm.
in this less than 10% of the population, not all of them are actually able to graduate. So we wouldn't want to deprive people who may not be college graduates to, run for public office. I mean, what would happen to ordinary farmers who do not have access to education, to workers, to the urban poor? I mean, we have to remember that formal education is not the key to learning or to enlightenment. I mean, we have a lot of college graduates, some of them lawyers, who do not even know how to analyze and how to understand. I mean, reading and writing is one thing, but understanding is another. I mean, we're not just
Mm.
talking wrong grammar, syntax, and diction. We're talking about the basic
Mm.
of making sense of social reality. In journalism, some of the best and the brightest journalists do not even have college degrees. For the
Mm.
record, Nick Joaquin is just a second year high school, has only attained second year high school, but he's one of our national artists and a journalist at the same time. I mean, I can also count several editors who are very well versed in journalism who didn't finish any degree. So I think the same case applies to our officials. We understand where the logic is coming from. We need better leaders, but better leaders doesn't equate to, having a college degree. Of course, it's a different matter altogether where you have candidates who lie about their degrees. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, because sometimes they claim to be graduates, but actually they're not. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're not against these people because they did not graduate. We're against these people because they lied about their credentials. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Danny. I think Ken wants to add something.
Yeah, I also don't agree in to at least a university graduate or a certain educational attainment. Again, no, some values and lessons are garnered from experience in actual oppression and marginalization. It can urge these people to stand up and the rest of the population who experience the same. So they may not graduate from college or any educational attainment because of life circumstances, because they are oppressed and marginalized and there are no response from the government, or let's say there are policies but they are not enough. So they ran to change the wrong system, but they can't because they don't have certain qualifications because of the wrong system. So parang walang silang hope. So I don't think that's, yeah,
Mm.
I think it's really a breach in democracy.
Thank you, Ken.
Hi,
Anyone else
Becca.
want? Yes, sige po.
Yeah, Becca. I think I have a different take on that. Under current social context, yes, I would agree to Prof. Danny and Ken. Medyo elitist yan at this point. And it is also true na there's no guarantee if you're a college graduate, you'll do good in public service. Merong mga hindi gumraduate pero magagaling sa public service. Meron din namang graduate pero nangurap lang. That's
Mm.
true. But siguro not now. In the future, when access to education is free for all and
Mm.
everyone really has pag madali na lang talaga ang access, then I think at the very least we should have a minimum requirement for politicians, for leaders. At least siguro babaguhin ang ating curriculum. Meron tayo sigurong mga about public accountability, mga subjects. But now, no. In the future, if access to education is no longer really hard for everyone, then I think there should be a minimum requirement at the very least.
Absolutely. I see JP nodding. JP, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ken and Prof. Danny earlier na sinabi nila na parang elitist. And I think that very anti-poor kapag i-require natin. Though gets naman yung pinanggagalingan ng mga ibang tao na because we want better government. Kumbaga, lalo na ngayong pandemya, we saw talaga na kailangan natin ng better na gobyerno na
Mm.
makakatulong ngayong pandemya. I think the people just want to elevate the quality of service. Kasi may
Mm.
mga sector kasi sa government na such as in Congress, na talagang kailangan ng academic standards. Needed
Mm.
talaga siya, especially because they are creating laws that affects our lives. So yeah, I think tama rin si um, Attorney Trujillo na I think hindi pa right time yung today now, but I think sana in the future may I think minimum requirement sana, but yeah, I think talaga antay-poor siya tignan. Yeah.
At the moment. Thanks for weighing in on that, gentlemen. We now move into our third question. So, expectations from leaders still is the subtopic, and our last one added for tonight. So, popularity, entertainment factor, and name recall are some of the factors that help candidates win. But these almost always undermine efforts to instill principles and platforms as deciding factors for electing our leaders. How then do we move forward to or overcome these? And anyone can weigh in on that. Well, I'll throw it to you, Ken. What do you think?
I think it's a challenge to create alternative spaces, where we can highlight the necessary factors in selecting a leader. And these spaces may be should be accessible to a lot of people and not only to an echo chamber, because usually when these spaces are created and we discuss, for example, education attainment, track record, or whatsoever, the discussion revolves around the same group of people, student leaders, or maybe people who actually care about track records and all that. But there are also groups of
Mm,
people where they really don't care, or they think that it's less of a factor in choosing a leader. So I think we should
mm,
also bring this discussion to the grassroots and not discuss it in an echo chamber.
thank you. Thank you, Ken. Prof. Danny, any thoughts on this?
We can discuss it in general or specific terms, but first allow me to speak as convener of Contradaya. So in general terms, voter education would be the key here. So as mentioned by Ken, it's the kind of enlightenment and clarification that we need to provide, voters in terms of choosing wisely. Because
Mm,
sometimes wisely is so often is an often oft used term, and it's often misused by a lot of people. So voter
mm,
education would be the general recommendation. But if we want to be more specific about it, I think this is high time for the Commission on Elections to call out certain political parties and certain candidates for the underhanded maneuverings that they're doing
mm,
even before the official campaign period. So one weakness of the COMELEC right now is that it is too legalistic in its interpretation of certain rules in pertaining to premature campaigning, pertaining to withdrawal and substitution of candidates, having placeholders, to run for elections, to run for specific positions. I mean, the COMELEC could have a pivotal role here as administrator of the election, and given its supposed quasi-judicial independence vis-a-vis, the executive branch and other branches of the government, it should be it should be exercising enough political will to call them out. If ever the COMELEC would have a stronger presence in the national debate regarding the conduct of the elections beyond all the legal technicalities, it is highly possible for certain political parties and individuals to veer away from the grand spectacle and the visual circus that we're having right
mm.
now. So basically, those are two main points that we can talk about later. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Danny. Anyone else who wants to add into that? So while you guys are thinking, stewing on it, so Prof. Danny highlighted to our listeners, highlighted the importance of voter education and obviously the part of COMELEC as well in doing that. So if no one else will comment on that, we will move forward with our last question for tonight. But you guys are free, I think, for maybe 5 minutes to um, question back or throw ideas at each other, but this time we'll give each one a time to explain themselves. So obviously for Prof. Danny as a journalist, and for JP and Ken as a youth representative, and for Attorney Nelson as a lawyer, as a Filipino in general, what are your expectations, and what does accountability look like from our future government officials or leaders? So I'm guessing the question is, what do you expect from our future leaders? Or if you may add to it as well, what should our viewers, our first time voters, our listeners today, what should they expect as Filipinos, and what does that look like in the future? So I'll start with you, JP.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I think for me, my hope is that our future government official or leaders will help all of us rebuild a strong democratic institution and place human beings and our country back at the core of our economic system. Nakita naman natin na talagang maraming nawalan ng trabaho, um, tawag dito, marami ang namatay dahil sa pandemya. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has propelled societies around the world into a multi-dimensional crisis. So I think we are not only facing a health crisis, but also economic and social crisis too. And I think this is very important ng ang iboto natin ngayong eleksyon ay ang mga leader na makakatulong sa atin. I think it all boils down to good governance, wise leadership, and uncompromised patriotism. Let's reject the plunderers, the incompetent, and the human rights abuser. I think let's vote for the best, brightest, and the most qualified among us. Yeah.
Thanks, JP. I'll move to you, Ken.
My answer is more anchored and hinged on misinformation in the age of misinformation, because we were talking earlier about how to counter it.
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot of youth are filled with anger. Imagine knowing the truth, for example, because you fact check everything, and then you see people asserting fake news. Sometimes you lose your patience and you're filled with anger. For example, in times also of historical distortion, where we 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 hold the truth about history, and then there are efforts to distort history. So eh, a lot of people are marginalized, a lot of people are oppressed, a lot of people experience different types of problems, especially in time of pandemic. The pandemic really affected everyone of all classes. It made people realize on how important good governance is, and how important putting the right people are in the government. So I think for what I expect in this 2022 elections, someone who can heal us from that anger and frustration. We don't want to shift to the 2022 and beyond still filled with this same type of anger and frustration. I hope that I expect a leader who will make the people see that there is still hope for a society na hindi nakaangkla sa karahasan at takot para maging matino ang isang gobyerno at para maging matino ang isang lipunan. And to answer the second question on accountability, very, very quickly, I think, well, basically, accountability is beyond acknowledging the lapses and shortcomings, but actually acting on making up to those shortcomings and lapses, to actually make up to the people, and do your best to comply with the responsibilities given to you, because you're elected to power.
Thanks, Ken. And I think just to add to that, no, I think accountability goes hand in hand with integrity. So, like if even when no one's looking, right? If you have integrity, you know that you're accountable to the people. And if you believe in God, you are accountable to God. So, that aside, Attorney Nelson.
Yes. My response to this question, I'll take this question in a pragmatic approach, okay, a practical
Okay.
application. My expectation in accountability and what does accountability look like from our future officials and leaders will depend on who will win the next election. Yes, because I think it is safe to say, well, in my opinion, that we lost decency in government. We really lost decency. Here you go, the president attacking one institution after another. You are destroying institutions. So who will respect the Senate, the court, if the president himself was attacking or is attacking these institutions? So now it follows that the next election, if you are going to vote another leader then you can already see, or you can already expect what would be the kind of leader you are going to elect, and what would accountability look like from that leader, depending on who are you going to vote on the next election, in the next election.
I see. So with what you're saying, Attorney Nelson, is, I guess, ang implication is we have to kind of think forward. Aside from what we want to expect, we have to be realistic and look at this person. Okay, if this person wins, this is what we can see what will happen. Is that?
Yes, because it does not help. It does not really help us if we're just here to express our expectation and accountability. It can be ideal. We can live
Yeah.
in an ideal world in saying that, oh, these are the qualifications of the leaders that I want. But realistically, practically speaking, you have to choose your leader for you to be able to come up with that expectation and that accountability. Without choosing your leader, we're just talking about what? We're talking about an ideal world that's not even
Possibilities. Yeah.
existing.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Attorney Nelson. I think that's very important. So now we have our ideals, right? But also now we have to look at the ones who are there, who are running for office. Who among them do we think will at least meet those expectations or strive to meet those expectations in terms of accountability and performing and good governance and, safeguarding democracy. Thank you so much, Attorney Nelson. Prof.
Welcome.
Danny, what are your thoughts on this?
What we need is the exact opposite of the political order and social system that we have right now, because we have a system that inherently oppresses the marginalized and the underrepresented. Don't get me wrong, this is not an activist sounding off empty slogans or, red letter propaganda. I mean, it's all about with journalism, for example, being a voice for the voiceless, because there is that duty. Well, as the late Pepe Jokno once said, those who have less in life should have more in law. So those who have the least access to basic services should be afforded more in terms of, the most basic of services like water and electricity. So we cannot afford to live in our own privileged positions in society and then ignore the wailings of the marginalized. So what we need is a rule of law, not the law of the ruler. What we need is media freedom and not media repression. So sometimes it's as simple as that. But when you look at it more deeply, it's not just an issue of changing leaders. I mean, don't get me wrong, the elections afford us the opportunity to choose some of the better, perhaps, leaders, or for lack of a better term, the lesser of all evils or the least of all evils, if such a term exists. But it's the system that would have to be looked at so that we would be able to provide for the marginalized and the underrepresented, so that the House of Representatives will really be the house of, representatives of not just the rich and powerful, but the marginalized and the underrepresented. But now we're in a situation where even party list systems are hijacked by the rich and powerful, and you are depriving ordinary, workers, peasants, indigenous peoples, and other basic sectors the opportunity to, articulate for themselves their own hardships. And sometimes the elitism is so nerve-wracking that you would hear statements like, the workers and the farmers, they're not educated enough to debate in Congress. Actually, they can. And they've done that in the parliament of the streets, but they refuse, the debate in Congress, and then just reduce it in the streets, and then you disallow people from rallying in the streets because they disrupt traffic. I mean, those things would have to be, radically changed. So it's not just changing the system or the law, but also the mindset of people, where we would, throw out the window any form of elitism and be more inclusive in terms of social development. Yeah, sorry if I said a mouthful already. Thank you.
No, that's fine, Prof. Danny. I think your answer was holistic. It wasn't so obviously the question asked for accountability and expectations, and I think the way you've put it is your expectation is a holistic approach. It's not just the leader, it's not just the system, it's the mindset of everyone listening here tonight and every Filipino. So that is our last question. Anything else that you guys want to add? You want to wrap up? So obviously tonight's topics were election literacy and voter education is such a broad topic. There's so many things when we were talking about what are we going to talk about, what are we going to ask. I feel like there's not enough time to discuss all the points that we want, but we were hoping to touch base on some of the issues that make it harder for people to actually make decisions that are educated or wise, for lack of a better word. Kahit nga sabi ni Prof. Danny, wise is almost misused these days. So for the last 10 minutes, you guys probably have a couple of minutes each to, say your bit, and, encourage our listeners more than anything, educate and encourage our listeners. There's also Q&A at the end of this. So we'll be entertaining 2 questions from our listeners tonight. So JP, what would you like to leave the audience with before we move on to question and answer?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I think for me, more on the fighting misinformation part. I think the internet can help bring out our best selves, but only if we can use it as an authentic, a forum for authentic communication. So I think for our viewers, let's pay attention to our own thoughts and beliefs, and let's try to be constructive when we discuss this with others. Yeah.
Thanks, JP. Very well put. Prof. Danny.
Okay, let me just end by inviting people to volunteer perhaps for Contra Daya if you still have time. We hope that you could send us, photos and video files of anything that would be suspicious. Certain evidence of premature campaigning, misuse of government resources, and other forms of fraud as early as now. You may send it to our Twitter account, at Contradaya, our Facebook page, contra.daya, and our email address, contradaya@gmail.com. We hope to consolidate all of the anecdotal evidence so that we can come up with some form of qualitative research to ensure that we can see a more holistic view of what's happening on the ground. We depend a lot on the cooperation of our volunteers, and of course, please wait for the more formal announcement as regards the monitoring center that we will be putting up shortly before and during and a few days after the elections. So we're still trying to figure out how we can have a monitoring center under restrictions brought about by the pandemic, but rest assured that we will continue our quest for clean and honest elections. So our motto basically is maghanda, magbantay at kumilos. Kaya mamamayan, magkaisa kontra daya. Yun ang panawagan po namin. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat po, Prof. Danny. Ken?
On my end, I would like to focus more on the youth vote since now we're also representing the youth. Siguro I would just like to put forward that and challenge the fellow youth to take the youth vote beyond elections. We know that we want to consolidate our power and put forward what the best interest of the youth of the general youth, the common good for the youth in the elections, but we also want to keep this the consolidation of our power of the numbers of the youth beyond elections being. We also want to look at youth vote as the vote for progressive policies, vote for better programs, vote for inclusive programs, etc., etc. So we want, siguro this is also an invitation to youth to continue on being organized and to organize continuously, to join progressive organizations, to join movements and campaigns to ensure na magkakasama tayo. No? We are one in this community and we can again put forward yung yung collective agenda natin as a sector, as a generation. Again, siguro also a challenge na this is somewhat what we're talking about here in the local. siguro a challenge to not be afraid to campaign for the right candidate. I know that there are a lot of organizations tagged as non-partisan. There are a lot of organizations tagged as away from politics. But as individuals, whatever our causes, whatever our advocacies are, we can't advance them if there is no enabling government, or if the environment is not enabling. So at the end of the day, we all want to vote for democracy, for good governance, and for human rights. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And Attorney Nelson?
Yeah, just very very quick. Uh, Correcting, rectifying misinformation or disinformation is a social responsibility. Let's not get tired of educating voters regarding disinformation and misinformation in social media. Because at the end of the day, um, everyone will be affected kung sino man ang iboboto natin in the next election. And then tama si Ken, do not be afraid to campaign for the right candidate.
Thank you, Attorney Nelson. And so before we move on to the question and answer, I really just want to thank all of you gentlemen for the work that you do in all of your fields and for the social responsibility that you live up to in your own time, in your own personal life. And I think you're all correct that there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of work to be done for everything to work. And I just applaud you guys for being able to throw out there your thoughts and your what you believe in and what you stand for without um committing a fallacy like ad hominem, like to our viewers. Like it's so common. I see it on social media where if I don't agree with you, I will attack your looks, I will attack your what you're wearing or no things like that. So I just applaud you guys for the way you conduct yourselves and the way you share your beliefs. So enough of myself. I will move on to the question. Direk, what is our first question from our listener tonight? Okay, so from Pot Viernes. Hi, Pot. So are Filipinos a helpless bunch in social media and in fact checking? When you have to hurdle tech algorithms and trolls spewing lies over and over, Imelda Marcos has rightly captured it. Perception is real, truth is not. Who would like to jump on this question?
Okay. Can I try to jump? Can I try to answer this? Hello?
Go, Prof.
Okay, yeah. So actually, in not so many words, Imelda Marcos already defined the concept of postmodernism, which is anathema, not just to the academe, but also in journalism practice. Because the argument there is that there is no such thing as universal truth and that we are entitled to our own truths. That's not true. And, as regards, Filipinos being a helpless bunch, or all of us being a helpless bunch on social media, not really. It's a long drawn out battle because the tried and tested formula against lies, misinformation, and disinformation would just simply be truth telling. We just need to really talk to people. I mean, the real people, not the trolls. We need to talk to people to tell them the truth. And from our own experience, anecdotal evidence, as mentioned by several people on social media, having conversations about our own life experiences would mean a lot. I mean, we can start off by talking about theories if these are academics or people who love to talk about theories. But for the most part, we can just simply talk about the hardships in life, the fact that we are still on lockdown. We are the only country in the world where there's still no face-to-face classes. So or widespread face-to-face classes. So those are the realities of the time. So if we can just have that conversation with people, starting with our own families, because sometimes my experience with my students, for example, in UP and in PUP, is that they find it difficult to talk to their relatives who are Marcos loyalists or DDS. You don't know which is worse between the two, but at any rate, that's how they feel. They don't. Some of them don't want to talk and don't know how to talk. Well, you can just simply start the conversation immediately and talk about what some of your relatives are going through. So that's how we hurdle. Sometimes algorithms can be gamed, and Facebook as a gatekeeper has done a terrible job, I'm sorry to say, in terms of curbing fake news. They're doing something about it, but it's still not enough. And the problem there is that the business model of Facebook is that they could earn from fake
Mm.
news by either boosting or sponsoring the posts and other technical details. So the battle is not really just on social media, it's about the conversations. And that's how we try to control the narrative, so to speak. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Danny. Um, another quick one, if anyone wants to weigh in on
Um,
that question.
if I may, Rebecca, I
Yes,
think
go for it.
I think we don't have, I think Filipinos in social media don't have to hurdle yung tech algorithms and yung tech algorithm, so to speak. Kasi it's parang it's highfalutin. It's very technical. But there are also progressive groups who are actually engaging in these discussions in trying to understand, and then once understood is communicated to the general public and tell them on what to do, or not what to do, but communicate the algorithm in layman's terms so that we could also know what to do. I think one of those examples is this discussion. Earlier we were able to actually discuss what can we do aside from reporting these accounts, what can we do in countering disinformation. And I think if we do these little things, adding up, these little things adding up actually makes a very important role for Filipinos in social media. So, uh, we are not helpless. We have a lot of things that we can do. We can report these trolls if they are not real accounts. We can again ask questions and engage in discussions in people who actually have genuine questions, so on and so forth.
Thanks, Ken. All right, we move to our next question. Hopefully, we answered your question, Bot. We are not a helpless bunch at all. All right, Joshua Marie Lumbera. Mahalagang bigyang diin kung nais nating tumulay para sa masa. Dapat tayong magsalita sa wika na kaya nilang maintindihan. Hindi tayo kulong sa edukasyon na nasa loob lamang ng akademya. Paano po ba natin ilalabas ang ganitong kaalaman para sa mga maralita nang hindi sila naiiwan? Who would like to answer that question? Sino po ang gustong sumagot?
Sige, pwedeng ako na muna. Ako yung nagsusulat ng column sa wikang Filipino.
Sige po,
Anyway,
Prof. Danny.
sige. Una sa lahat, paumanhin kay Ginoong Lumbera kasi talagang kailangan talagang magsalita sa sariling wika. Nagkataon lang na yung forum na to nag-i-Ingles yung moderator, kaya sumasagot ako sa wikang Ingles din. Pero ano't ano pa man, tama po yon, kailangan po nating magsalita sa sariling wika. Kaya ang pag-abot natin sa masa ay labas talaga ng social media. Kumbaga magandang instrumento at magandang mekanismo yung social media para maiparating ang nais nating mensahe, at sa panahon ng lockdown, syempre may susing papel din ito sa ating pang-araw-araw na buhay at sa komunikasyon na rin. Kaya lang oras na matapos yung lockdown, kailangan nating bumalik at gamitin at i-maximiza yung iba't ibang pamamaraan sa media. Radyo, hindi natin dapat kalimutan, gayon din yung television at pati na rin yung print media na tinatawag natin. Pero tama si Joshua, panahon na rin para gumamit ng sariling wika. Huwag tayong magpatali sa Agosto na ito lang yung panahon na inaalala natin yung sinasabing sariling wika o yung wikang pambansa. At kinakailangan talaga yung epektibong komunikasyon sa pamamagitan ng wikang mas naiintindihan ng lahat ng mga tao. Kasi yung bahagi rin ng elitismo, munti ko nang makalimutan, yung paggamit ng dayuhang wika. Pero syempre, sa punto ng forum na to, my impression is that we also appeal to a more international audience, and I guess that would also explain why the preference of the organizers here would be to use the language that would be better understood by an international audience. Not that we are trying to be exclusive to them. It's just that I would let the organizers explain why they have chosen English as the platform for communication tonight. Thank you.
Salamat po, Prof. Danny. Sino po ang gustong sumagot sa katanungan ni Ginoong Lumbera? Wala na pong gustong magdagdag ng kanilang mga thoughts at kaisipan. Meron pa po ba tayong mga susunod na katanungan sa ating director? Do you have any more questions Wala na daw po at this point. Maraming salamat po muli sa inyong lahat. Sana po marami pong natutunan ng lahat. And we hope everyone learned a lot from tonight's discussion. And before we end tonight's webcast, may we show on the screen the amazing creatives on our 6th digital issue as we are now going to launch Haraya, Hilagpos sa Haba ng Panikala. Hi, everyone! Hello! Sila po ang ating mga creatives na bumuo po ng Haraya. So, in case you're all wondering, Haraya is an old Tagalog word for vision and imagination. Haraya is our contribution in sparking dialogues and dissent, pushing necessary societal transformations, and it is a living project that expresses our hopes and aspirations for this coming election. Alongside these hopes is our duty to take a proactive stance on national concerns by being both receptive to and critical of the policies, programs, and reforms of the elected officials. So, for the information for everyone, Haraya issue is now available to read for free. Wala po itong bayad. Pumunta lang po sa noviceph.com/Haraya issue. Congratulations to all the creatives who are part of this amazing issue. You're all awesome. And to our panelists, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Prof. Danny, thank you for your time. And sorry po, kami po ay nag-overtime tonight. But thank you so much for all your wisdom. Atty. Nelson, JP, and Ken, thank you so much po for giving us your time and your wisdom. And quick announcements for the updates on the Chastity Issue Collector's Edition prints. The copies are in. Kindly give Alan time to pack and we will ship your copies starting next week. And good news sa mga hindi nakapag-pre-order, there will be a limited number of copies up for grabs on our Shopee account very soon. And to all collage artists, watch out for the call for submission for Novice's 7th digital anthology, which will be dedicated solely to collage art. That's all for tonight, folks. Together with We the Future PH, we invite our fellow Filipinos to vote and support leaders who stand up for a rights-based, data-driven, and democratic governance. Get to know more on how we can do this through the We the Future PH National Youth Agenda by visiting WTF.ph. Remember, our vote is not just a part of a social media montage of indelible ink applied to our forefinger as a pretense of doing something for a future. Exercising this right is centered on continuous involvement and our demand for accountable and just governance. The voter registration is extended until the end of the month. Just visit your local COMELEC offices or inquire online for schedules and venues. Please register now to vote. And when May 9 comes, please vote wisely. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you. Bye.